An ominous mansion, said to be haunted by a witch, whose presence is heralded by the appearance of a mysterious butterfly, a beautiful maid, a gorgeous rose garden, romance, drama, even murder. A Japanese video game with gorgeous music, considered by some to be the greatest visual novel of all time. Now, what if I were to tell you that I'm not talking about one game, but two? And would you believe me if I said that these two games could not be more different? And they are both worth your time. In this video, I am going to be introducing two visual novel epics and hopefully convince you to give them both a shot. Now, the fandoms of both these works, the house in Fata Morgana and Umineko When They Cry, tend to be very protective of their spoilers and will tell you to just read them, especially Umineko. However, I am aware that these works involve a lot of reading and represent a significant investment of time, energy, effort, and patience in our fast-paced modern lives, and simply telling someone to play them is a hard sell if they aren't already a big fan of visual novels. For this reason, I am going to go a little further when trying to sell you on these games. And even though I am going to do my best to keep my pitch vague and vibes-based when it comes to details, I'm going to step into territory that some fans will consider to be spoilers. So, if you are a big fan of visual novels and want to go into these completely blind, you should. These are both must-play classics, and you can and should add both Umineko When They Cry and The House in Fata Morgana to your wishlist and turn off this video right now. But if you're not yet sold, then I invite you to stick around as I introduce these two games. The House in Fata Morgana, also known as Fata Morgana no Yakata in Japanese, and sometimes shortened to Fatamoru, was originally released on PC in 2012. However, I heavily recommend you get the Dreams of the Revenants edition, released on PS4 and Switch in 2019 and 2021 respectively. Have a Switch lying around? Get a Switch 2 or PS5 for Christmas? Just download The House in Fata Morgana Dreams of the Revenants edition. It often goes on sale. Please, please, please. It is the definitive edition, and when I talk about this game in the video, I am talking about the full package contained within the Dreams of the Revenants edition. Anyway, you wake up in a chair in a dark mansion lost to time, with only a fireplace for light. You can't remember anything about yourself, but you are not alone here, for a maid is also here with you, and she calls you this house's master. She invites you to glimpse the lives of previous residents of the mansion through various doors in an attempt to remind you of who you are. Surely your life lies behind one of them, and when the maid leads you through the door, please remember to not let go of her hand. Umineko When They Cry, also known as Umineko no Nakukoro ni in Japanese, first came out in 8 installments, released biannually at Comiket between summer 2007 and winter 2010. It's available on PC in English, but there are many ways to play the game, and just as many guides online to tell you how to set them up. Most fans recommend playing with either the charming original sprites drawn by Ryukishi07, or with the so-called PS3 sprites that look quite nice. I recommend playing with the Japanese voice acting, which is wall-to-wall stellar, and the source of some classic lines such as... Anyway, you follow Ushiromiya Battler, who has not been on speaking terms with his father in 6 years. But this year, he's finally making amends, so he is finally attending the annual Ushiromiya family conference in his rich grandfather's mansion on his rich grandfather's private island, Rokkenjima. But after the family gathers on the island, a typhoon descends, and nobody can leave or call for help for 2 days. And as bodies start to drop one by one starts to wonder whether this is the work of the witch said to haunt the island. Please note that for brevity, from now on I'm going to refer to these games as Fata Morgana and Umineko respectively. Like your English class from grade school, we're going to be doing some comparing and contrasting in this video. It's amusing to me that two of the visual novel all-time greats have so many similarities, both superficial and profound, including things that are major spoilers that I cannot get into here. So it makes sense to me to group both games together when talking about them. However, I would be doing both games a grave disservice by saying they are the same. Their tone, their scope, their world building, the way they present their stories, the way they deal with their story's emotional heart, and even the innovative ways they use the medium of the visual novel could not be more different. But they're both great, they're both worthy, and they both deserve to have their similarities and differences appreciated and celebrated. Therefore, compare and contrast. Both Fata Morgana and Umineko have stories that operate in predictable cycles. Imagine a time loop, except the events play out differently every time. But no matter what happens, each loop concludes in pretty much the same way. In Umineko, the murders play out in each episode with ultimately none being left alive. In Fata Morgana, each owner of the house ends up entangled with the fate of a mysterious girl, and they each ultimately meet a tragic end. Even though that might sound a little boring, both games have an important reason why they use this predictable structure. Of course, one aspect is that being caught in this loop makes the reader long to see the cycle broken. But more importantly, both stories use repetition and echoes of the same characters' stories to gradually drill into the reader the underlying themes and deeper understanding of these characters. As the reader is gradually made to understand the themes and the characters on a deep, almost subconscious level via repetition, empathy and understanding well up. Empathy for characters who may be very different than you and go through things you can barely imagine. And understanding for what the author is truly trying to convey with their story. So, I encourage you to exercise a little patience when reading both works. I promise the repetition has a point, and by the time you reach the end of both games, you may even feel that everything was worth it. Umineko and Fata Morgana reward those who look closer, who give the stories and mysteries careful thought, who revisit them a second time or more with a new perspective. An amazing thing that Umineko and Fata Morgana have in common is astonishingly thoughtful, empathetic portrayals of LGBTQIA characters. I will not elaborate further. The fans of both are very inclusive, and if you run across any fans who aren't, well, they could probably use a refresher course on reading comprehension. Above all else, Umineko and Fata Morgana are both about love. Love is complicated, and yet so simple. It is the one element in the universe, and the force that can drive a soul to endure for 1,000 years, never giving up hope on a better life. Through love, you can change your own life, your own fate. Through love, you can shape your future in the way you see fit like magic. It's true that love can cause the bitterest heartbreak, but in turn, it is love that will ultimately heal all of those wounds. Love is understanding. Understanding is devotion. With love, all distractions fall away. and you come to understand what is important. And it is only through letting love back into your life that one can embark upon one of the most healing acts of all, forgiveness. Through love, one can finally let go. Now, despite these quite profound similarities, there are quite a few things that set the two games apart. And because of this, I do feel Umineko fans owe it to themselves to play Fata Morgana, and vice versa. Umineko is a genre-bending mystery story, while Fata Morgana is a drama that pretends to be a mystery. I don't mean this as a slight towards Fata Morgana. To me, the difference really lies in the reveals of both works. Of course, I won't spoil these reveals, but Umineko obscures many truths in its text, showing the reader pretty much everything they need to find the truth, but employing many sophisticated tactics of misdirection and obfuscation to keep that truth elusive. In some ways, one could call Umineko an endless mystery. Some people come back to Umineko again and again, and tease out more insights and truths with each read-through. Meanwhile, Fata Morgana's mystery is simply a lack of information. I believe this is thematically appropriate in ways that I will not elaborate upon. Instead of the truth being hidden through misdirection, the truth in Fata Morgana feels more like it is submerged in the shadows of the mansion, clenched white-knuckled in its hiding place. As the reader gains more information, truths are one by one dragged, kicking and screaming, into the light. Umineko questions the nature of truth, even the importance of truth, and the culprit of the murders is a master of avoiding the light. Trying to even grasp their form often feels like trying to grasp smoke. On the other hand, Fata Morgana is much more interested in revealing the truth, exposed and raw, beneath the blinding light. Fata Morgana posits that problems and traumas must be faced in all their ugliness so that they can be processed, and healing can begin. Umineko keeps its tenderest emotions hidden and asks that that privacy be respected. I don't believe either perspective is right or wrong. In fact, I agree with both, even if they at first seem to be diametrically opposed. Part of the magic of consuming art is exposing yourself to perspectives you'd never experience otherwise, and subsuming the wisdom found there into the endless work in progress called yourself. Now, in the context of visual novels as a genre, both games operate quite differently. Umineko is almost a straight-up novel. For almost its entire duration, there is no way for the player to interact with Umineko or influence its events beyond progressing text. There are a few helpful UI elements to help the reader keep track of information. However, that's about it. The reader is simply a spectator. And yet, the game begs you to engage with it. And engage with it you can. Endlessly. Discussions and interpretations of Umineko continue on the internet to this day, and I believe that as long as Umineko can be read, the discussions will never truly end. Umineko will never be conquered. Umineko will never be completely solved beyond a shadow of a doubt. And when I consider the fact that the game manages to achieve this despite how rigid it is mechanically, I can only conclude that Umineko is a staggering achievement. It may even be one of the greatest video games ever made. Meanwhile, Fata Morgana feels more experimental with visual novel mechanics. There are moments of player choice, and even a few alarming instances of timed inputs. Failure, or picking the wrong choices, will lead to various bad endings. But when they happen, it's quite obvious that you are not finished with the game, and so you press doggedly onwards towards the true conclusion. The coolest innovation Fata Morgana pulls off, though, is something I'm willing to bet many players completely missed. It has to do with the dialogue history UI. Many games nowadays have dialogue history. If you missed a line of dialogue or want to check on something a certain character said, you can open the history window and scroll to the line you're looking for. Now, what if I told you that in certain parts of Fata Morgana, the dialogue history may show hidden lines that were never said? Before you exhaust yourself scouring the dialogue history for hidden goodies, however, you should know that the extra lines don't appear until door 4. Once you get to door 4, though, start checking that dialogue history. I can't begin to describe to you how cool it is. And though the altered dialogue history is pretty much limited to door 4, it's not exclusive to it. There is an instance near the end of Reincarnation that's a total tearjerker. So, since I'm recommending 2 games, which should you play first? If you love gothic horror or historical fiction, or if you are simply enthralled by the art of Moyotaro that I've featured in this video so far, then by all means play The House in Fata Morgana first. Just be warned that the story is quite emotionally intense, with fewer periods of rest and levity than Umineko, though that's not to say the game is devoid of humor. Though I will also say that if you're like me and love a story with catharsis and emotional payoff, The House in Fata Morgana is the game for you. However, you must play The House in Fata Morgana, A Requiem for Innocence, and Reincarnation in their entirety for the full effect. They are all included in the Dreams of the Revenants edition, so please, please, please get that version. On the other hand, if you find yourself more driven by logic than emotion, and especially if you enjoy mystery fiction, Umineko may make more sense to play first. Much like reading a detective novel, mysteries are laid out in the text, and the author invites you to take a crack at solving them yourself as the story moves along. And these mysteries are by no means easy to solve. In fact, it can be easy to believe these murders were in fact committed by a witch and done with magic. However, all of the mysteries do have solutions, and if that sounds like an exciting challenge, then go ahead and dive right into Umineko. Also, if you have played or watched Higurashi When They Cry, or happen to be an enjoyer of Dante's Divine Comedy, you should go ahead and play Umineko first, as you will likely enjoy how those works are referenced. Now, if both of these games sound equally intriguing, or if you don't particularly belong to any of the aforementioned categories, then I would recommend starting with The House in Fata Morgana, purely due to its length. The word count is shorter than Umineko, and so it is comparatively a smaller commitment. Then, if you finish The House in Fata Morgana, and want to tackle something bigger, Umineko will be right there waiting for you. However, before I end the video, I would like to give some warnings so that you can dive into these games sufficiently informed of what you're getting into. First of all, content warnings. Here are the warnings for content that applies to both games. Here are specific content warnings for The House in Fata Morgana. I also want to give you more information on the structure of each game. I mentioned before that Umineko has 8 episodes. These episodes are actually further divided into 2 groups of 4. The first half is sold on Steam as the question arcs, and the second half is sold as the answer arcs. Therefore, if you're getting Umineko on Steam, please start with the question arcs and then follow up with the answer arcs. Also, if you recall, I recommended that you play the Dreams of the Revenants edition of Fata Morgana. The edition is made up of the base game, The House in Fata Morgana, followed by a prequel called A Requiem for Innocence, and then concluded with a sequel called Reincarnation. There are a few short stories scattered between these major chunks, and then some side stories unlocked at the very end. Reincarnation takes place during the modern day, and has a radically different art style by illustrator Domko, and for the first time has voice acting in Japanese. I want to make this clear right now, because many people seem to be put off by the style shift, and that sours them to reincarnation, which I think is a terrible shame. According to developer NOVECT's pixiv Fanbox journal entry from December 30th, 2023, Fata Morgana series artist Moyotaro could not produce the art for reincarnation for health reasons. Video games, or at least from back when these games came out, are made by human hands, and we should appreciate all of the hard work that goes into making them happen at all, especially these miraculous works produced by small teams. For what it's worth, I think Domko's bright, flat colors fit the sun-bathed world of Fata Morgana's modern-day Europe quite well, and that the Japanese voice acting is decent, with one character's performance in particular being a standout in my opinion. I just hope that once you get through The House in Fata Morgana and A Requiem for Innocence, that you will weather the tonal shift with grace, and enjoy what the writer is trying to say, and that your experience will culminate in exactly the kind of incredible emotional payoff that I experienced. After all, without love, it cannot be seen. In the world we live in as of 2026, we are leading more isolated lives than even a generation before. The mode of our interactions is increasingly dictated by what will make a few tech companies the most money. We are bombarded daily by more information than our brains ever evolved to process, and as more and more of that information is negative, we become overwhelmed and numb to it all. And as our lives become harder, it's all too easy to harden our hearts, to look out for only ourselves and our loved ones, to regard people we don't understand with indifference or hostility. It's times like these, when heartfelt works of art like Umineko and Fata Morgana have incredible potential to do good, if only more people knew about them and gave them a fair shot. And that is why I felt compelled to make this video. These games are some of the best out there, and I hope that when you can give them the precious gift of your time, these visual novels will in turn make your life just a little better. If you don't mind a little plug, I stream on Twitch. I often play visual novels on stream and voice act them in their entirety myself, if there isn't any English voice acting available. I actually needle felted the witch's butterfly from The House in Fata Morgana back in the day, and I actually streamed both Fata Morgana and Umineko in their entirety. Yes, I read both of them out loud. Yes, I voice acted like 1.5 million words, or at least 99% of them. Anyway, the VODs for both games are on my old YouTube channel. I'll link the playlist below if you're interested. And for what it's worth, I think these games are really fun as a communal experience, but if you're a solo reader, then, hey, if I could stream both games in their entirety, then I'm sure you can get through them just fine. I believe in you. And happy reading. Oh, right. I've got a little gift for you. Here's how you pronounce these names.
Jacopo.
Beatrice.
Oh, those Italians.